Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with the midweek update in the world of cannabis. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it, as it really helps out my channel. And then, of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up over time, and take advantage whenever you're ready. But we're going to start with an update from Akerna. Their flash report that the 4th of July weekend is expected to bring in $206 million in national retail cannabis sales. Just keeping up pace with these holiday weekends, as historical data shows that the Friday ahead of the 4th of July weekend spikes in sales, with this Friday, July 2nd, expected to retail nearly 91 million, up 60% from an average Friday. This will likely be the second highest sales day of 2021 after 420. Year over year, we've seen a 23% increase in the number of products consumers and patients are purchasing for the 4th of July holiday weekend, says James Arendt, business intelligence architect at Akerna. With the holiday falling on a Sunday this year, dispensaries should be evaluating staffing and preparing inventory ahead of the weekend to ensure that they are ready to accommodate these increases in both traffic and sales. Saturday, July 3rd should bring in another 72 million of cannabis sales, and Sunday, July 4th is predicted to garner an additional 43 million. Sundays are historically the lowest sales days of the week, but sales will still be elevated due to the holiday landing on that specific day. While further breakdown of who's supposed to buy what is available down here, this again goes to show that every single holiday we see, it appears more Americans are spending their hard-earned dollars on cannabis, which is going to be good for the industry and driving sales in the long run. But the big news this week, as Supreme Court Justice Clarence says federal laws against cannabis may no longer be necessary. This is a big deal, as one of the Supreme Court's most conservative justices said on Monday, because of the hodgepodge of federal policies on cannabis, federal laws against its use or cultivation may no longer make sense. Absolutely true. Great to see someone in a position of power in the U.S. make sense for once. A prohibition on interstate use or cultivation of cannabis may no longer be necessary or proper to support the federal government's piecemeal approach. Now, we're going to take a look at this clip. Also, just wanted to show you that this is Clarence Thomas, not this guy. This is a guy named Pete, but also shows that he's black. And as a conservative member, someone who's black, similar to those who have been targeted the worst by the war on drugs, he's making a statement that should go a very long way based on his position of power and his credibility. So that's very good for the industry, but just for America overall, that someone, again, in a position of power is willing to speak up and make sense. But we'll watch this.
All right, Pete, let's talk about one more case. Justice Clarence Thomas, one of the court's most conservative justices we know, spoke about federal marijuana laws after the court declined to hear a case about it. What did he say, and how rare is it to hear from one of the justices after the fact?
Well, not rare, but rare to hear one of them, like Clarence Thomas, say, federal marijuana law is a mess and maybe we ought to change it. This was an appeal from a Colorado marijuana dispensary that wasn't allowed, like other businesses, to deduct its ordinary business expenses. And that lost in the lower courts, appealed to the Supreme Court because the IRS treats marijuana businesses differently, because federal law still says it's illegal to possess or sell or deal in marijuana. What Justice Thomas says is maybe this doesn't make any sense anymore, with 36 states now allowing marijuana dispensaries, 18 of them legalizing recreational marijuana. He said the federal law here is a hodgepodge, that it sort of turns a blind eye to what the states are doing in some areas of the law, but the IRS still treats these businesses differently. Maybe he said it's time to take another look at this.
You gotta love that, because yes, it absolutely is. Okay, no other video starting. It absolutely is time to take another look, so great to have that. Especially at the exact same time when Mexico's Supreme Court strikes down the cannabis prohibition after lawmakers failed to act. So nearly 3 years after Mexico's Supreme Court ruled that the nation's cannabis prohibition is unconstitutional, it voted on Monday to end criminalization on its own because lawmakers failed to pass a legislation bill by a key deadline. The court in 2018 ordered the legislature to enact a policy change, but while both chambers of the Congress advanced reform legislation in various forms and required multiple deadline extensions to do so, it was ultimately unable to fulfill that obligation on time by the end of the most recent session. The 8-3 vote means means that cannabis possession and cultivation for personal use will be legal nationally. So I was confused too. I was like, well, isn't this going to give the cartels more power? But clearly it's just for personal individual use as opposed to mass cultivation and trafficking. So the Ministry of Health would still have some regulatory authority with respect to permitting personal cultivation, but people will no longer need to submit requests for legal protections through a more complicated judicial process. Advocates say this decision underscores the need for legislators to expeditiously pass a measure to implement a comprehensive system of legal and regulated sales. They want to ensure that the market is established that's equitable, addresses the harms of criminalization on certain communities, and promotes personal freedom. And lawmakers came close to achieving that goal over the past 3 years, but failed to get that job done. So honestly, it seems like a mess, and I just do not understand enough of the Mexico's legislative process to really make any comment on it. But I do think that it would be important for lawmakers to actually make some sort of regulations and get this done so that the government can compete with the black market sales and over time try to eat up some of that market share. But then after that article, we see Mexican president considers putting cannabis on ballot following Supreme Court rulings. Now, I'm not going to spend much time on this because it's just talk and fluff, and I really want to report on action, but I just want to show you how really delusional and disconnected these presidents are from just how an individual would use cannabis for personal use at all in the first place. President Andres Manuel López Obrador said at a news conference that, of course, we are going to respect what the judicial power has decided, and we're going to evaluate. We're going to see what effect it has, according to a translation. What effect not being able to criminalize people for personal possession has? I mean, it's not going to be a bad thing. If we see that it does not help, that it is not good for the country, that it is not good for facing the serious problem of drug addiction, that it is not good for stopping violence, then we would act. What? Well, the best way you would act is to create a legal regulatory framework so that over time you can try to compete with the black market and cartels and take market share away from them, as opposed to seeing what issues of drug addiction and violence this is going to have when you stop criminalizing individuals. It makes no sense. Anyways, that's just my view. I could be totally wrong. Let me know down below what you think. Regardless, what we typically see when governments become too big is that they care a lot more about perception and maintaining that perception as opposed to reality on the ground and, making positive change that's actually going to affect the citizens in that country. But good news is that New Mexico's cannabis legalization law officially takes effect as of yesterday, with limited personal possession and cultivation officially becoming legal for adults 21 and older. People can now lawfully possess up to 2 ounces of cannabis, 16 grams of concentrates, and grow as many as 6 mature plants for personal use, but it will still take some time before retail sales launch. So still a bit ironic that you're allowed to buy your legal cannabis from non-legal sources, but regardless, better than getting arrested and having your life heavily impacted. While New Mexico is the first of 3 states where adult use legalization laws are set to take effect this week. Next up are Virginia and Connecticut, which both have new policies ending cannabis prohibition coming into force on Thursday. So that's a big deal. This week changes a lot for states in the U.S., so that's awesome. Great to highlight that. And while sadly in Delaware, cannabis legalization effort is dead for the session, bill sponsor says following equity disagreements. So an effort to legalize cannabis in Delaware is dead for the year due to disagreements among lawmakers over social equity funding. The House sponsor, Republican Ed Osienski, says he was caught off guard after being informed that this bill's inclusion of a new fund to promote participation in the industry by communities most impacted by prohibition means it would require 75% of legislators in the chamber to approve it. Sadly, the session ends on Wednesday, and the sponsor says it won't be brought up by then. Osienski told the Delaware News Journal that he is sorry that it didn't happen this year, but I think it's going to be a better bill once it's further revised and reintroduced in 2022. So it means the fight is not over in Delaware, which is good. Sadly, it just did not happen in this current session. On to this report from Todd Harrison, this one from Roth Capital, giving us a weekly rehash. As last week, Connecticut becomes the 19th state to legalize recreational cannabis, and the Rhode Island legalization bill passed the Senate needs work for House approval before a final sign-off from Governor Dan McKee, who has expressed his support for the measure. So I did not realize that Rhode Island's effort has gotten this far along, but that's great to see. Hopefully that can get legalized before the end of 2021 as well. On the consumer side, both Canada and the U.S. reported strong April and May cannabis sales, while a report highlighted women, particularly Gen Z women, have emerged as the fastest growing cannabis consumer group. Similar to other CPG categories like alcohol, we expect to see a host of new brands and products tailored towards female preferences to capture this rapidly growing female consumer base. On the back page, we discuss the progress of the U.S. House Committee bill approved last week to let researchers study cannabis from dispensaries, and with DEA loosening, we see a potential beginning for major medical cannabis research, which is very important, especially for all the organizations that are getting behind And then we have this very timely tweet from the investor Brennan Van Zee on Twitter, just highlighting what makes these US MSOs so fundamentally undervalued and attractive at these prices. I was somewhat surprised to learn that many of the lesser-known cannabis stocks that trade over the counter expect to be profitable this year. And so if we take a look, despite cost burdens from pot's federal illegality, US cannabis sales yield nice profits. And if you take a look here, these are names I've been harping on about since the beginning of the year. And this past month actually presented us with the best buying opportunity since January, so I hope you took advantage. But if we're taking a look forward-looking, 2021 estimated adjusted earnings per share, all of them are positive. And if we fast forward to March 2022, when us investors would be watching these companies releasing their fourth quarter earnings and full year financial results, for them to be profitable is a big deal. Because if we look at some other famous companies that aren't profitable yet, you're going to see some big names on here. Airbnb, Blue Apron, Casper, Dropbox, Lime, Lyft, Peloton, Pinterest, Slack, Snap, Uber, Wayfair, WeWork, and Zillow. Companies you've no doubt heard of with a lot of buzz around them, ranging in size from 100 million to 100 billion, but at the end of the day are not profitable yet, which does not, in my view, make them generational investment opportunities, unlike cannabis, which I do compare to the big FANG tech stocks in their early days, because no doubt they have their proof of concept now. And with tech, what they found out with, like, when there's not a lot of operational expenses and there's not a whole lot of upfront costs and you don't need a brick and mortar shop, wow, once you're profitable, you can really scale up. And I see the cannabis companies in the exact same position, especially because these federal laws force them to work within their own jurisdictions and get very efficient and very effective, so that once these federal laws do change or are removed, and allowing these companies to jump into interstate commerce, then we can really see the economies of scale build out of where they're at. And I think going forward, we're just going to see even more growth and value recognized as cannabis becomes more accepted and the industry grows from 20 billion right now to 40 billion to 100 billion in time. So isn't that awesome? Next, we've got the best ways to invest in top cannabis stocks in 2021. 5 cannabis stocks for your watch list next week. Names you've likely seen in this video or in past videos: Green Thumb Industries, Cureleaf Holdings, Cresco Labs, Trueleaf Cannabis Corp, and Air Wellness. So we're not going to spend too much time on this article, but of course, if you want to grab it, you can check it out below. But their final thoughts on it: as the U.S. continues to expand into new states and the recreational cannabis market grows larger, these cannabis companies could have long-term growth for investors. U.S. cannabis companies have performed much better than their Canadian counterparts and could continue delivering growth in 2021. Now, I don't think they're referring to share prices in the past 4 months, but likely referring to, fundamentals on the ground. Because of this, these could be the best U.S. cannabis stocks to buy before July. Why before July? Is anything expected to come after July 4th? I'd love to know. But just based on that, I wanted to bring you to the U.S. cannabis fundamentals from mjstocktrader.com, because again, if you are just getting to my videos and you're like, okay, well, I've learned about this industry, but I don't know which company to choose, I again recommend you watch many videos so you can identify some of them. But here we have a list of U.S. multi-state operators and Canadian licensed producers, though. I would recommend taking a look at the U.S. multi-state operators first and foremost, but this is one of the best resources out there that takes you through the share prices, the highs, the lows, the current price, the price change, percentage change, the diluted market cap, their recent revenue, and then their 2021 estimates, 2022 estimates, and then their full 2021, full 2022 price to sales, quarter-over-quarter revenue growth, annual revenue growth. All of the information that you need is right in here. So as long as you look this over as much as you can until you start to understand it, this is a great resource for you to look for the best potential U.S. multi-state operators that you can get into to take advantage into the second half of 2021. So you can grab that link below in the description. Now, a few more stories, as Rwanda has just passed a law approving the use of medical cannabis. So great job for Rwanda, one of the small African nations. Medical use of cannabis and cannabis products can only be made on the condition that they are prescribed by a specialist medical doctor, says Article 14 of the Ministerial Order. So that's good news regardless, as Rwanda is taking steps to allowing their citizens to get access to a safer alternative medicine. New study saying 71% of gynecological cancer patients find relief from medical cannabis. So as the evidence stacks, we want to see it. A small study published last week in Gynecological Oncology Reports found 71% of gynecological cancer patient enrollees reported self-improvement while using medical cannabis of at least one symptom, with 15% of patients discontinuing its use due to side effects. And that's okay. But mind you, if 71% benefit from it and only 15% decide to discontinue, that is why we should make it available, because it's helping more than it's not helping. And the study involved 45 patients with a median age of 60 years old. The study was conducted by researchers at New York University's Perlmutter Cancer Center, State University of New York Downstate Health Sciences University, and the New York University Grossman School of Medicine. In all, 56% of the patients use medical cannabis for pain, 47% for nausea and vomiting, 33% for anorexia, and 27% for insomnia. More than 70% of the patients reported improvement in nausea and vomiting, with 36% finding medical cannabis relieve their pain. So definitely seemed to have more benefits again than it didn't, which is great to see. And in this limited cohort of gynecological oncology patients, medical cannabis was effective for the relief of nausea, vomiting, anorexia, and insomnia in a majority of patients, but was less helpful for pain management. So that's okay. It is a diverse plant, and people can use it for whatever needs that they find it helps them with. And on to this tweet from Todd. Congressional report gives lawmakers an overview of hemp market and policy challenges. I'm not going to get into the hemp market because it's something I have not researched enough about, and this channel is specifically aiming to cover the unfolding cannabis industry over time, but I just want to remind you all of the hemp plant, the sibling to the cannabis plant. The hemp plant is non-psychoactive, so you cannot get stoned, but it has CBD in it, and it's used for industrial purposes such as fiber, seed and grain, or flour. And you can use the fiber for all of these purposes, the seeds for all these purposes, and the flour for extracts. And if you can't see down here, consumer wellness products containing cannabis-derived extracts and concentrates, food, beverages, confection, cosmetics, skin products, topical creams, dietary supplements, and pet care. Basically Cannabis 3.0, but this is what we could have been using had we never criminalized the cannabis plant or the hemp plant in the first place. So if you think about it, for the last 50 years, we've been deprived of this amazing plant and tricked that it was evil. So much so that we need to keep it illegal to protect our kids, and the parents ate that up as, government America pushed out corporate America's agenda on them. But that has been the case, which has over time kept this plant out of our hands and made the big business industries like the petroleum or oil industry, big pharma, big alcohol, big tobacco, big textile, whatever, all of these industries stronger for the sake of it. So when we start to revisit why it's been illegal this whole time, it's sad, scary, but it's so important to remember that we are close to the finish line, and the fact that this awareness is getting out there thanks to the internet and thanks to the plant being so good that it can't be ignored anymore. Change is finally coming, but this has been a very long fight. Just want to remind you that for this plant and for the sake of humanity, we can see the light. And lastly, we've got Todd's Substack from this past week, the Cannabis Summer Courtship. I'm not going to go through it all. There's one snippet that I do want to read for you all, but obviously you can grab it below. And this comes from Alliance Global Partners Institutional Research, as MSO malaise creates buying opportunity with clear multi-state catalysts ahead. Cannabis stocks began the year with favorable momentum from increased prospects for federal change post the November election and Democratic winning a majority of the Senate in January. However, stocks have weakened over the past roughly 4 months after limited action from Congress has taken place on cannabis reform. We argue that MSOs in particular offer value at these levels given low double-digit 2022 enterprise value to EBITDA multiples represent a discount to high-growth retail and CPG despite the higher growth profile, along with positive momentum continuing from strong Q1 2021 prints and positive second half 2021 setups, clear multi-year catalysts from new states beginning adult use sales, state by state with MSO exposure herein, and federal cannabis reform. Most notably, we would call out how U.S. MSO stocks are in a clear position to perform well regardless of potential changes at the federal level as laid out below. Sentence is worth repeating, as most notably, we would call out how MSO stocks are in a clear position to perform well regardless of potential changes at the federal level as laid out below. As events allowing uplisting occurs in 2021, is that foreshadowing? Uplisting drives re-rating as institutional investors and retail investors such as those on Robinhood are more easily able to invest in space, along with likely M&A activity from major CPG companies and Canadian LPs. Plus, lack of change at the federal level is okay because MSOs will just continue to build out their respective moats, particularly favoring positive cash flow companies that are less reliant on cash infusions. And out of all of them, TrueLeaf is the most cash flow healthy company. This will result in the stocks becoming increasing value plays absent stock appreciation as investors roll forward their valuation year base. So just wanted to go through that, but there's plenty in here that if you've not checked out, you should definitely read through, because this article in itself is enough to give you the reassurance that you need that we are invested in the right industry. And although it's taken a long time, folks, justice for this plant is finally being served. So that is it for this week's episode, or this week's midweek update. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of this episode. If you have any questions or concerns about the industry or any specific companies, let me know below, and I'll do my best to try and reassure you. But always do your own research. It's so important because over time, you doing your research just makes you a smarter and better investor. And that's what we all want at the end of the day, right? So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on it. Subscribe if you don't want to miss any future videos. And I want to wish all Canadians a very happy Canada Day. Tuesday, and I'll be back on July 4th with This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great week, everybody.